we just have parking on over here, and we're just doing reverse parking, and then the office is right behind the gray trailer there.
A few months ago, I attended an adoption event in Billings. The BLM holds these events to get some of the wild Mustangs in their care into new homes. Ever since that sale, I have been feeling the itch to get another Mustang. It's been quite a few years since I've had one, and it really sparked a fire in me to do some more investigating into how the internet adoption works. For adopters on the East Coast that do not have access to a permanent holding facility or in-person adoption events, this online hub is the perfect place to dream about a new Mustang and set up a place closer to home where you could possibly pick them up. Even though I do live out west, the closest pickup for me for this internet adoption is in Wheatland, Wyoming, which is about 7 hours from my house. I would much prefer to get a horse from an in-person auction event like the one I attended this summer. It was way closer to my house, the weather was much nicer, and seeing them with my real eyeballs is definitely a plus. As I was perusing through the available horses, I started to recognize a few familiar faces. For some reason, once I see a horse in real life, especially if there's something odd about them like this guy's missing ear tip, I will remember them for a very long time. While the videos the BLM takes at the holding facility and puts up for the internet auctions are really nice to have, it is so much nicer to see them in real life interacting with other horses. And that got me thinking if I would recognize this horse from earlier this year. His tag number is 1870, and lo and behold, he was one of the horses that I did see a few months ago. It was really interesting to see how much this little guy has grown since the auction. He definitely seemed to be in that kind of gangly stage of growth. He is the smallest horse in the pen, and he was a little bit more scared than all of the other horses. In addition to seeing these guys a little bit slicked down, it is nice to be able to see them calculating all of the humans watching them. You get a better idea of their temperament and how easy or difficult they may be to train. We are experiencing a little bit of a snowstorm today, so I am stuck inside, and it will be fun to see if I can see any other horses that may be available. When scrolling through the horses, I instantly remembered this guy. One of my favorite horses from the adoption earlier was 1930, and this guy looked very similar to him. I have been toying with the idea that I could still possibly get a Mustang for the challenge that is happening in 2025, which I guess is now. Since this horse is now 3 years old, he is eligible. Technically, this horse probably doesn't actually turn 3 until July. He's probably the exact same age as Scarlet. Realistically, if I was going to pick out a horse to participate in the challenge this year, it would be one that's a little bit on the older side. But this guy is super cute. He's a really good moving horse, and he does appear to be pretty calm in the pen. I don't specifically remember this one from the sale, so I'm going to go back and see what he was like. After keeping track of his little left hind sock, I did remember this guy once I viewed my footage again. He was one of the ones that seemed a little bit tired after a few days in the public eye. With a handful of very similar looking bays in the same pen, he was a little bit hard to pick out. He does have that sock, and he is missing a little bit of hair on his forehead. And the longer I looked at this guy, the more I started to really like him. As I was going back in my footage, I recognized another number that was available for adoption. 1936 is a horse from the same exact HMA. He's a little bit bigger, but they have so much in common. Checking out this guy's updated video, it does look like he has gained a significant amount of muscle mass. This horse was likely gathered up at the same time as the other one since their numbers are so close together. They are likely bred very similarly and should carry a lot of the same characteristics. I really like how forward moving this horse is without being too terribly scared. This pen that they're doing the videos in at Wheatland doesn't really have any barriers around the outside, so it can be a little bit scarier for these wild horses. It looks like this horse has only been in holding for a little bit over a year and is already up for sale. Typically, the plain looking horses will be offered for sale after they do not get adopted 3 times in a row. I kind of like this one a little bit better for the challenge. He seems to be a bit more mature. Even going back and looking at his video from a few months ago, you can tell that he's just a lot bigger than basically all of the other horses in this pen. He could have been born earlier in the spring than the other horses, but when you see him next to his other little friend, you can definitely tell that there is a significant size difference. When I take in Mustangs, I really try to get 2 at a time, and for me, these 2 boys would be a perfect buy. As I went back through my old footage, my memory continued to be jogged as to what horses I really liked from this adoption. The majority of the ones I saw this day did get adopted since then, but there are still a bunch that are available in this month's internet adoption. This next one I do remember because she was the exact same color as Scarlet. This mare is 2822. She's from Salt Wells Creek, which, if you guys remember, is the HMA that Stewie's mother is from. There was another horse at the adoption over the summer from the same HMA that was the same age, only a bit bigger. A lot of times people that go to these auction adoptions are looking for a horse that's closer to 15 hands, and this little girl is under 14 hands. If you look at how she interacts in the herd, she is pretty chill. She's just standing on the inside, observing all of the other horses. I honestly did not think too much of this little brown horse at the sale. There were other horses in her pen that were much more flashy. But after going back and looking at her video posted for this month's internet adoption, I was really impressed in her overall attitude. They do have her updated height at 13.3, which is quite short. That is about the size of Whiplash. She is still pretty young, so I would imagine that she's gonna grow at least 2 inches by the time she hits maybe 6 years old. In her updated video, she is starting to get pretty woolly for the winter, and it looks like she has really started to pack on some weight. This facility in Wyoming does get very similar weather to what I have up in Montana. It's a little bit warmer, but it seems like they do a really good job of plumping them up a little bit for the winter. I was really impressed by how this girl behaved while she was all by herself. I zipped back over to see my footage from a few months ago to see if she was relatively the same. It was really interesting how a second look at these horses can change your perspective completely. At the sale over the summer, she really wasn't on my radar, but now I think she may be the nicest horse in this bunch. With everybody else being a little bit spooked by the humans, she's just kind of being chill, having some snacks, not reacting too much to everything that's happening around her. What initially started off as a fun wintertime activity for me is really making me think that I do need to get a Mustang in the future. When this auction took place, I was still very involved with getting Scarlet gentled down. But now that she has really settled into her life as a domestic horse, I can start thinking about getting another wild one sometime in the future. As my brain started scheming, I did go back and see if a few of my favorites from the sale were there. While looking for my favorite, I did notice that this girl was available on the internet auction. Generally at these in-person events, the horses with the loudest or most striking color will get picked up first. I'm a little bit disappointed in myself that I did not notice this horse when I was there in real life. I was definitely preoccupied by this very pretty liver chestnut horse who wanted nothing to do with me. Ironically enough, the whole time I was trying to get her attention, this sweet little bay horse was just coming up to the fence, acting like there was nothing wrong with being so close to a human. And much like the last horse, as I went back through the footage, I realized that this mare was probably the best one out of the group. Out of this entire pen of horses, she was the only one that has not yet been adopted, which is super surprising because she is by far the largest horse in the pen. Being a mare and a very plain bay color probably didn't help her at all. But after observing all of the other horses' temperament, I believe this horse is probably the most trainable of the bunch. While she is the tallest in this group, going back and looking at her recent video on the internet auction, she does look a little bit on the smaller side. It might be the way the camera is set up or how big the guys are that are moving these horses. Either way, this girl looks significantly different than she did a few months ago. The one thing that has not seemed to change though is how outgoing and calm she seems to be about everything around her. Typically in these internet auction videos, the staff is on the outside of the pen. Of course, all Mustangs are not going to allow someone in the pen with them. I actually think there are 2 guys in this pen moving the horses around. It really gives you a little bit more insight into how these horses might be to train. And by the end of this video, I was completely in love with this little mare. I would love to see a horse like this in the English portion of the challenge that they're having. I think the cutoff date is somewhere around April, so there is definitely still time to get a Mustang if you want to participate in that challenge. I tried to go back in my footage to find something to fault this mare on, and I really couldn't. She seems to be the bravest as they're moving around. While the other horses look pretty terrified of the humans, she seems to be the glue that's kind of keeping them all together.
Okay, this is our last pen of horses today.
I do think if this really pretty liver chestnut horse was not in this group that I definitely would have noticed her more at the time. I really don't mind training a more reactive horse, but for someone that doesn't want to deal with that challenge, this taller bay horse seems to be the pick of the bunch. It's been really interesting going back and finding all of these horses again that I completely missed the first time around. But as I go back through the footage, I do notice that one of my favorite horses from this adoption event is available online.
27, 45, 25, 41, and 30, 81. South Pass, Derbytown, Salt Wells, which is south of Interstate 80.
This Salt Wells mare was one of my absolute favorites from this summer. She was this really beautiful seal brown color, kind of like the same color that Pete is. She was a little bit on the shorter side, but she did seem very mature and had pretty darn good conformation. Overall, just a really nice looking girl. At the sale in real life, she did seem like a very sensible horse, and as I searched for her on the internet auction, I was a little bit bummed to see she didn't have the same sparkle that she did at the sale. I don't know if it was because she was by herself or because these pens are fairly open, but she did seem a little bit more flighty. With some extra weight for the winter and her long hair coat, she did look significantly different than a few months ago. This really goes to show you that these horses can look completely different depending on the time of year when they're up for adoption. Even though this girl is running around quite a bit, you have to remember there are 2 people in the pen for these videos, and she is getting relatively close to them for a wild horse. While she does look like a nice horse in the more recent videos, her videos from this summer make her appear to be a much fancier horse. Now a year older, she is 6 years old. This girl looks very much like one of my little cow pony quarter horses with a refined head and a more stout body. I'm hoping somebody on the internet spies her and sees her potential.
1879, 1870, 1912.
Even though I do love having Scarlet around, it is just so much harder for me to keep mares in my current setup. As a form of self-torture, I did go back through my footage and pick out a horse that I would choose if I were to participate in the challenge event coming up. This guy was a little bit on the grumpy side at the sale. I was a little bit surprised to see him again. He was one that was on my list that I did not tell you guys about. He was in the same pen with the 2 that I showed you earlier in the video and my favorite who got adopted at the event. When I popped over to watch his video from recently, I was blown away with how much his body had matured over the last couple of months. His chest was much wider, he had bulked up significantly. He just had the look of a much more mature horse now. Before I saw all these horses this summer, I had never heard of the Roberts Mountain HMA. The vast majority of the ones that I've seen seem to be a little bit on the quieter side. By the end of this video, these guys were basically free lunging him. While these horses do appear a little bit on the easier side, as in less reactive, they are still a wild horse. In the last couple of months, I've noticed online a lot of people returning or rehoming their horses after they get them home. If you ever consider adopting one of these horses who are completely wild, it is important to make sure that you have the proper support system in place. It is pretty easy to get swept up in the excitement of the auction and then end up in over your head. This horse had changed so much over the course of a few months, I had to go back and check the blaze. Even though these horses are not actively being trained, loading onto a trailer and getting taken to another place does impact how they view the world. They're just a little bit more used to seeing humans in this kind of environment, so if they're hauled around a lot, getting taken to different adoption events, that does have the potential to quiet them down a little bit. This guy is another one that when I went back and took a second look at his time at the auction, I was really impressed with how he acted in the herd. This is another really good example of how a second look can completely change your perspective on one of these wild horses. And if we weren't getting 4 inches of snow right now, I would be scheming on how to get this guy home in a few weeks. As I start reflecting on 2024 and looking forward to the new year, something that is really sticking in my mind is the fact that I do want to get another Mustang. I did bid on one on the last internet adoption that just didn't work out. He went for way too much money. which, if you guys have been watching my channel, did kind of turn out for the best because I was able to bring home a horse that really needed a lot of advanced care. I try really hard not to get too starry-eyed about these Mustangs. There are a ton of them that need homes. The current internet adoption has almost 1,200 animals available. I try to be pretty realistic with the amount of time that I'll have to train. Already this winter I am failing miserably at getting some of the horses started under saddle just because the weather doesn't seem to be cooperating as I would like. Taking on any horse is of course a huge responsibility, but adopting a completely unhandled Mustang holds another level of risk. I think that it might be super helpful for anybody that might be a beginner adopter to see the process from start to finish. If that is something you guys are interested in seeing over the next year or two, let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this little flashback from a few months ago. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for the next video.